Returning to the Bruce Collins Show, our guest today is Jared Knott. Jared Knott is the author of Tiny Blunders, Big Disasters, Book 2, The Many Tiny Mistakes That Changed the World Forever. And he's also the international best-selling author of the first book in the series, Tiny Blunders, Big Disasters, 39 Tiny Mistakes That Changed the World Forever. Jared has had numerous articles published in the Mensa Bulletin and in graduate school textbooks on subjects ranging from Supreme Court reform to Arctic exploration. He was a decorated combat infantry officer in Vietnam in the 1st Air Cavalry Division. In his civilian career, he has served as a vice president of sales and marketing director in the home improvement industry. Jared Knott, welcome back to the Bruce Collins Show.
Thank you very much, Bruce. It's an honor to be here again.
It's great to have you back. Now, you had a computer glitch, but we're using the magic of the phone now to broadcast this. So people are going to be listening to this on streaming. They'll also see it on YouTube. At the moment, I'm showing a picture actually of the cover of your first book, which the second book looks similar to the first. It's Tiny Blunders, Big Disasters. So last time you were on, we focused on book 2, and I highly recommend both books. If I buy a book that I like and there's a series, I usually check them all out. But in today's interview, I wanted to focus on some of the stories from the first book, Tiny Blunders, Big Disasters. One of the chapters in book 1 was Hitler the Unkillable. Can you explain that title?
Yes, it was amazing how many times Hitler avoided death. There were a number of close calls. They had a big push, or they had a big riot in the streets, and he was there leading it. And then the army came out, and they were shooting people, and somehow he managed to step away and not get shot. Just one example of World War I, he was out in the trenches, and I have to say he's saying good about it, but he won the Germany's highest medal for valor in World War One, escaped death close several times there. And then also, this is kind of an amazing thing, there was a carpenter who wanted to blow Hitler up, and on his own, he went into the big hall where they were having a big meeting scheduled some days hence, and he dug out a section there and planted a large explosive device, okay, and then he set the timer on it, so it would explode when Hitler was there on the stage, there on the dais that particular evening. Okay, so when the evening comes, the bombs, the bulkhead overhead, the clock is ticking away, and because it was going to be a foggy night, they're going to have to go back. I think it was to Munich by train instead of by airplane because they couldn't fly in the fog. So Hitler leaves 15 minutes earlier than he was scheduled to leave. So he packs up, he and his cohorts, and they walk out. They leave a lot of the Nazi officials right there, and right on schedule, the bomb explodes. Huge, giant explosion. A huge bulkhead falls down, kills the number of the Nazis there up on the dais. So but Hitler had left 15 minutes early, but it's just a close brush with. And it was right after the invasion into Poland. Hitler had been killed right then. There's a good chance that there would have been no World War II without Goering. I think would have taken over. It was not in favor of the war, and the war might have ended before it even really got underway. So time after time after time, he managed to escape death until after it drugged the world through World War II, killing millions and millions and tens of millions of people. And so some people say, it must be the work of the devil that this evil man was able to survive so long, and no one deserved to die more than he would. And if it except for that 15 minutes, history would have taken a completely different direction. Goering would have taken over as the chancellor, and there might not have been a World War II with the Western Allies or even with Russia at all. That might have been very few points in history was there a turning point that had such enormous consequences. So if the gentleman had set the clock 15 minutes earlier or 20 minutes earlier, it would be a different world that we live in today.
You know, Hitler's an interesting character. I've been starting to play around with the idea of doing a little history on my talk show, but offering it as something kind of separate, little history stories. And a couple of things that I looked at were Operation Mincemeat and Operation Bodyguard. And both of those were the Allies used a belief that Hitler had, specifically where he thought the Allies were going to attack, and they confirmed it with Operation Mincemeat. They actually dropped a cadaver into the water and made him look like a courier of intelligence. And then with Operation Bodyguard, they concocted this sort of ghost town that was a large military base with inflatable tanks. And they even floated the idea that Patton was in charge of the military. That actually contributed to the Normandy invasion, because Hitler wouldn't relieve those troops that he thought the area that he thought Patton was going to attack. So that leads me to confirmation bias. Is that one of the great villains in history?
There's again and again they're able to use the Germans had a very high estimate of Patton. They're able to use him as kind of a decoy at the beginning, and then by the way, talking about Hitler avoiding death, there's one other one we should mention, and that is that in fact I think it was Tom Cruise even made a movie about it, Valkyrie, Operation Valkyrie. Anyway, they managed to draw Hitler up to the Russian front for a big conference on the Russian war, but the main purpose behind it was the general's assassination plot to kill Hitler. And as he's getting on his plane to go back to Berlin, this one general came up and had this gift box. Said, "Please give this such and such general back in Berlin. It's a bottle of spirits of some kind, liquor of some kind." But it wasn't liquor at all. It was a bomb. It was a British artillery shell with a timing device. And they pulled the trigger. They put it on the plane. The plane flies off, and of course they are pacing back and forth, wondering what's going to happen. But the plane several hours later lands in Berlin without incident. Oh my gosh! If somebody opens up that box and they see that it's a bomb, we're going to be in big trouble. So they're able to go back there and meet with them, and I need to get this gift box back, so on and so forth. Let's open it up and drink the cognac toward. No, that we can't do that. That would be enough to go anyway. So they managed to get it back. They open it up, and apparently had to be a small timing device, but apparently the atmosphere may have interfered with the ability to function, but the trigger device simply malfunctioned. But that would have killed Hitler about a year earlier up in the air, and the war would have ended probably sooner with the a treaty with the Americans and the British, and I would say raised the lives, the map of Europe would have been different. But that's just another one of those things where the hand of the devil stepped in to save Hitler from the destruction he deserved.
Yeah. I thought Operation Mincemeat and Operation Bodyguard, what was so intelligent was the fact that they took something that Hitler thought was going to happen, namely where they were going to attack, and they confirmed it by these fake reports. And then they did the opposite. They actually attacked in a different area. So very, very smart way to trick Hitler. How did the bridge at Chappaquiddick earn a chapter in your first Tiny Blunder Big Disaster book?
Yes, well, at its core, we have a serious character issues with Teddy Kennedy. He's going off to be alone with the young woman, um, Mary Jo Kopechne. Okay, and then the bridge is at a sharp angle with the road. He may have been drinking, he may have been under the influence, so he goes off the bridge into the water, flips upside down, and there he is in the water. He's able to work his way loose, but Rachel Kopechne is still down there in the car underneath the water. Well, okay, what do you do? Well, this house is right there with the lights on. You go running right down there to the house, start pounding on the door, call the police, call the fire department, woman's trapped in the car underneath the water, blah, blah, blah. That's what you would do. That's what I would do.
Mm-hmm.
He does not. To avoid against the scandal, he walks all the way back to the party that was taking place, goes to two of his aides, they explain the situation. They come back out to the car, they jump in the water, they're beating on the windows, the doors, they can't get them open. Nobody calls the damn police. The house is right up there with lights on. Go there, knock on the door, pound on the door, call the police. No, they don't. They leave her down there in the car all night long where she asphyxiates. Well, damn it.
Yeah.
Damn it. So anyway, the next morning they said somebody sees the car down there in the water. They finally do call the police. Of course, it's long since too late. Then the diver goes down and opens up the door, gets into it. And she popped herself up in an airspace inside of the car, but she had run out of oxygen, of course, overnight. So she asphyxiates there, propped up, waiting for help to come. And when she saw the guys there pounding on the window, she went, "Oh, thank gosh, I'm going to be saved." But no, she didn't take into account how corrupt they were. So, and then Teddy Kennedy, oh my gosh, I just want to think, what the hell were you thinking, buddy? Anyway, so then there's the big scandal that comes out of it, and it probably kept him from becoming president of the United States, but he was a person of cowardly, rotten character, and it really falls all on him.
Hmm. Yeah. And can you tell us about the lost treasure of Bad King John?
Yeah, and that's kind of interesting. That guy couldn't catch a break. He was may not have been as bad as people said, but he was winning his enemies. There was that civil war going on, and he took the treasury of England, Britain, and he put it on a kind of a caravan. It had silver, it had gold, it had a lot of jewels in it, and he's crossing this kind of estuary, kind of this area there it's called the Wash, and it's a dry land when the tide is out, but it's of course underwater when the tide is full. And as they're crossing it, somehow the uh, pathway, the kind of the causeways they're on, collapses, and the wagons slide off and fall deep into the mud, fall up in the mud, kind of like a quicksand kind of thing, all the way down to the bottom. Well, okay, that's the king's treasury. That's this gold, this silver, this jewel, so it's over. And that was how he was paying the troops that were with him. Well, they weren't doing it because of his charismatic personality or anything. I think he was getting paid, but treasury down at the bottom of the big bulk. They did not get paid anymore, and he goes onto a castle and dies 3 days later, maybe because he's heartbroken or got sick or whatever. That those jewels, those diamonds, several years ago, read they're worth about 70 to $100 billion, and they're down there feet, so many feet of mud, even as we speak.
Hmm.
But no one knows exactly where, and it's not practical to try to find it, but they're there.
Yeah.
Okay, billions of dollars in silver coins, gold coins, diamonds, jewels, whatever, that will probably never be found unless there's some advanced technology sometime in the future can locate them.
Hmm. And again, we're speaking with Jared Knott. He's the author of the Tiny Blunders, Big Disasters book series. There's book one, which is 39 Tiny Mistakes That Changed the World Forever, and book two, The Many Tiny Mistakes That Changed the World Forever. Again, Tiny Blunders, Big Disasters, and I'm showing a copy of the book right now for those of you watching on YouTube. Now, Jared, does this current conflict with Iran have the potential to becoming a tiny blunder, big disaster?
Pretty so, and a big, I just openly say a big supporter of Donald Trump. Was very lucky Mike. It's just a nightmare to imagine that Joe Biden was
Mm-hmm.
still president or Kamala Harris was still president. He's so good for the country in so many ways. If not for his getting elected, along would probably have a nuclear weapon right now. They were within 3 to 6 months of developing one. So big supporter. Thank God he's president of the United States. However, we have run out of munitions. Okay, we have expended a lot of our accurate, our precision missiles are down. Like 89% have been expended. We also, in the defensive weapons, the Patriot and the anti-missile missiles, a high percentage of those have been expended to the point that we don't want to expend any more because that would put me in this funnel position. If, say, a war were to develop, China attacks Taiwan, it takes months and even years to build all of these missiles. It just takes a few minutes to fire them off. So the reason that Donald Trump has not gone in to finish the job is that we run out of run very low on the missiles, the bombs, the rockets, plus the anti-missile missiles that are needed to accomplish that job. So that's where we sit right now. Now, uh, they of course have some resources that they can still use. I think that they have bombs that they can be delivered by the jets. Okay, so we still have a pretty strong aggressive arsenal. But he's holding back because of our the stockpile has gotten so low. What they've already started doing is applying economic pressure which can, in some ways, can be more powerful than even the explosives. Of course, the embargo against the Iranians at the Strait of Hormuz is still very much in place. They cannot get any ships to go out, ships to come in. They're losing millions of dollars every day, and they cannot. The Fed that pay the troops. I think in 3 weeks, the inflation is running 70, 80, 90%. People have nothing to eat. People have no money. Just enormous economic pressure being applied to the administration, to the Iranian government, and hopefully over the weeks and months that will be finally brought to bear. The situation of not having a nuclear weapon, I think, with all the bombing is under control. Economic pressure may work where the explosives did not, but that's the situation that we're in. It's too bad that it couldn't go as well as it did in Venezuela over just a few weeks or a few months. But that's the kind of the bogged down situation that we are in. He called it a mistake that they didn't build up the stockpiles beginning a year and a half ago. He called that a mistake, but it's the situation that's not perfect, but still not unmanageable.
Mm-hmm. And for those who may have missed the previous interview that I did with you where we talked about book 2, hopefully they go back in the archives and watch that. But just for today, revisiting Tiny Blunders, Big Disasters, book 2, is there one story that stands out the most to you personally?
Well, the one I kind of like the most personally is, here's the teaser for it. Uh, uh, what outrageous character bought stolen horses from the Comanche Indians using counterfeit money? What could possibly go wrong? This very colorful character was later played in a John Ford movie starring John Wayne with the help of Natalie Wood. And that had a major impact on the history of the United States that led to the birth of Quanah Parker, one of the leading Comanche chiefs. And it was a very interesting tale. And James Parker was the man's name. It was an over-the-top, outrageous character. It was who may have been guilty of serial murders. He was guilty of counterfeiting. He was guilty of drunkenness. He was guilty of all kinds of things, and never got convicted of any of those crimes. Frontier justice was a little bit frail back then, and then John Wayne played him to a T. Some people say that's the best, certainly one of the best westerns ever made, one of his best performances, playing this over-the-top, outrageous character, James Parker, with led to the kidnapping of Cynthia Ann Parker, who was the mother of Quanah Parker.
So do you think modern technology and now artificial intelligence, do they reduce human blunders?
Well, I'd want to say so. There's a great complexity going on out there. Never don't want to sound too cynical, but never underestimate the ability of human beings to goof things up. It seems like there's always mistakes to be made. Now, I can't imagine a more competent administration, the Trump administration. They have very, very talented people at the Department of War. He goes to Doug Burgum, the Secretary of the Interior, I believe it is, and Mark Rubio, J.D. Vance, very, very talented people, very well researched, Race and Kane, brilliant officers, recently researched, but that's not to say these situations do get much more complex. And complexity can lead you to mistakes. So I think that we're still going to see screw ups. People shouldn't have thought of it, but going forward, there's the old things in the Bible that there'll be wars or purpose to war, and wars till the end of time. Whether
Yeah. So, as a young person, and even today, I used to watch a lot of private detective television shows and movies. And I interviewed a private investigator and asked him the value of intuition with private investigations, because a lot of the portrayals of private investigations on television, the person has a hunch, they have an idea, and they go with their intuition. And his comment to me was, there is no intuition, just facts. So do you think that people who rely on hunches are responsible for many big disasters?
well, it's interesting you bring that up. The Germans have a word for sixth sense, a sixth finger or a sixth sense, and Hitler claimed to have great intuition. In fact, that the story I was talking about is avoiding being blown up on that particular beer hall incident. He said that Hitler's intuition, knowing to leave 15 minutes earlier, is what saved him. Well, okay. And Eisenhower was talking about later. He said Hitler, for all of his intuition, did guess that Normandy was going to be one of the possible areas of the invasion. But yes, I do think people develop an instinct based on experience, in particular, when they it's kind of pattern recognition. We see a similar situation coming up, but you can the ability to identify the pattern and to play that kind of hunch definitely is effective, and it's of course based on facts. So I say yes and no. No, I do think intuition, firefighters sensing. Sometimes it doesn't apply. It's the smell of the smoke, the particular the angle of the door, on the fact this particular door won't open or whatever it might be, kind of reminds him of previous situations, which is a kind of intuition. So it has this, definitely has this merit. Also, will say one of the strengths of the jury system is human beings having a natural intuition about other human beings. So when they see someone testifying on the stand, they don't seem to be quite being themselves. They don't quite seem to be saying it in a way that seems authentic. There's the intuition that people have about other people. And that's one of the things that is the strength of the jury system. So giving you a partial yes and a partial no, but sometimes people can talk themselves into thinking that something is right based on emotional influences, and that's wrong. But I would say intuition has its place. Yes.
Hmm. I feel like maybe you watch current events and you say sometimes, I've seen these patterns before. So is it true? I believe Mark Twain once said history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. Is that true?
Yes, there's no question that you look at human nature and you can see all these same patterns being repeated. But at the same time, each situation is different. And one thing that there's always saying that generals are always fighting the same last war. Well, people sometimes will look at the last war and they're looking at the wisdom that would have worked in the last war and they apply it to the current situation. And the current situation may be completely different. Vietnam, the argument was, well, remember we made the mistake back in Munich. There was a building a force, a gathering threat, and we ignored it, and so we had to nip it in the bud. And the same logic was also years after 9/11 and the war with Iraq. Well, we didn't connect the dots early enough. We didn't nip it in the bud earlier. Well, that nipping in the bud worked for Munich, but it was all wrong for Vietnam. Nipping in the bud that would have worked for 9/11, but it was all wrong for the war in Iraq, because people were looking backwards instead of the one lesson is you look at the current situation, see what the particular characteristics are for that situation, make your decisions based on what's current. Don't try to base it on past experiences that are a different set of circumstances altogether.
Mm-hmm. And so we're talking with Jared Knott. He's the author of Tiny Blunder's Big Disasters. There's the cover, books 1 and 2. I highly recommend those books. They're great. Now, Jared, if every president, CEO, and military commander read your books, not necessarily a story, but what lesson do you hope would stay with them?
Well, that it would enrich me somewhat if they did, which would be a good thing. But uh, yes, going back there, it's interesting. In the first book, I talked about the importance of checklists, and there was a book written by a doctor, uh, Atul Gawande, and it was the Checklist Manifesto. And it was written, I guess, about first came out about 15 years ago. And he was saying, gee, the operating room is getting so complex, so many different factors coming up, is getting to the point that's beyond the ability of the human mind to handle it all correctly. I'm wondering, he said, I'm wondering how the people over the airline industry face that same kind of situation, because that also can be very complex. So went over and talked to the people at Boeing. How do you handle the complex situations? How do you deal with it? It went back to a famous airline crash way back in 1936. It was they called it the B-99. It was the forerunner of the Flying Fortress, the 217, B-17. And anyway, what happened was the two of the best pilots that Boeing had were taking off to the plane, and they had forgotten to turn off, I think it was the elevator switch. okay, which caused the plane to stall and pancake down. Both the pilot and the co-pilot were killed. When they investigated, they said, gee whiz, it was a simple thing to flip that switch, and that would have avoided the entire mistake. They were very experienced pilots. What can we do to prevent this? And they came up with the checklist program. Okay, so which beginning then, and it's used to this day, and with great thoroughness and throughout the industry, a series of 37 items or 41 items, whatever it is, that the pilot co-pilot go through before the plane takes off. Step number one, be sure and engage such and such a gear. Check, check. Check number two, turn off the elevator pilot. Check, check, whatever it might be. Check number three, number four. They go down this checklist every different item. Human beings can only think about one thing at a time, but there may be 37 or 45 things they have to do to get the plane off the ground. Well, the checklist system, the primitive, humble checklist, was critical and was used at that point going forwards, especially used in World War II. We had a lot of beginning pilots, and to save many lives and avoid many accidents since then. And so they took it back to the operating room. They implemented it and saw a big drop and fatalities coming out of the operating room as a result of the checklist. Here's the cart here, and here's the antibiotics that you might leave on it. It has the other equipment on that you might need. It's all part of the checklist system. So if something comes up, we are prepared, we are ready. It's not something that we forgot to do. And that checklist system is used to this day. By the way, it's also parallel to that. There's also something called timeout. Um, and an operating room, they stop, okay, before they cut anybody, and they say, okay, my name is Dr. Tom Jones, and I'm here for such and such an operation. This nurse here, so and so and so for the anesthesiologist, so and so, so and so. Anesthesiologist, everybody goes around the room and discusses and say, what are we doing? The purpose of the operation is to amputate the left leg of the patient. And so, well, left leg, tell me this, is that you'll be amazed. Left leg, I thought it was the right leg.
Wow.
She said, you'll be amazed at what happens. You're planning to do the wrong operation, cut off the wrong leg, make some terrible mistake, and it's stopped by these timeouts that they have, plus also they stopped by the checklist. So, again, human mistakes are just, mistakes are human nature. You have to have systems that counter those mistakes in advance so that they don't take place and we both have both our legs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. That's why corporations have processes. So your books are Tiny Blunders, Big Disasters. You have book 1 and book 2. What can people find at the website tinyblundersbigdisasters.com?
I'm glad you asked that question. We think of the website as being a Disney World for history buffs. It's a kind of an amusement park. You go there, we have 4 free chapters. We also have a portrait gallery, one of my favorite parts of the book, and it has 27 personalities with a little bit of dirt on each one. And I'm half kidding there. It also has a fun quiz. It has the book trailer, and it has the also the sizzle reel, which is a lot of fun. There you can see, and it's about 3 minutes, but it's a whole bunch of fun. So it's a fun place to visit. And of course, then from there, if you choose to, you can go ahead and purchase the book. And of course, Christmas is not that far away. It'd be a great Christmas present for people who enjoy history.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, before you go, the last time we talked, you had mentioned you were starting to work on a book about unsolved murders, I believe. Are you still working on this, or is there anything coming up for you that you would like to tease to the audience?
Well, yeah, and my wife wants me to spend a lot of time with her, and so she's telling me that I'm working on that book that you mentioned, which I think is going to be great. Maybe the best of the 3. And the title is "The Hushed Up Murders of Famous People." They murdered big and got away with it. And it's amazing how many, when people get up to high level, there's a lot of people who are knock them off. And there's a number of examples. Of course, Sonny Liston was murdered by the mob to hush him up because he had taken a dive against Muhammad Ali. There's also Jimmy Hoffa was killed by his best friend at the behest of the mafia. There are a number of examples there. But one of the most exciting examples is Marilyn Monroe. And there's strong evidence to indicate that she was, and it's shocking to say it, but was murdered by the Kennedys. Robert Kennedy, in particular, Peter Lawford was there with him. Had there was a breakdown afterwards when it was all over with it, plus a doctor. And there's investigators there in Los Angeles always believed it was a homicide from the very beginning. Robert Kennedy was at her house the day she died, and and so was the doctor, and so was Peter Lawford. strong evidence to indicate that the doctor injected her with whatever, and she died as a result. She had an affair with both Robert Kennedy and John Kennedy. She was out of control, shooting her mouth off. If the press got wind of it, it would be a big, ugly, ugly, embarrassing to have the President of the United States having an affair and his brother having an affair with Brown Monroe. So, as shocking as it sounds, the Robert Kennedy, who then got on a plane, flew up to San Francisco, went back to Washington that same day. That's one of the strange weather mistakes that never would solve.
Fascinating. Again, we've been speaking with Jared Knott. He's the author of Tiny Blunders, Big Disasters, Book 1 and Book 2. They're both available on Amazon. Book 2 is the most recent book, obviously. And Jared, thank you so much for joining us this week, and I hope I can have you back when the new book comes out.
Terrific. Yeah, go to tinyblundersbigdisasters.com. It's a fun place to visit. Love to be back again. Appreciate it very much.
Okay, great.